Welcome to Koru The Podcast, not the news round, the podcast today. And we've got a great guest with us today, Purnell, all the way from Hong Kong. But before we get into that, I just need to make a little bit of a plug for some of the courses that we've got coming, starting to be launched in December. There'll be some promotional pricing around it in December, and then they'll start going live courses in January. Those courses include AI in your setting, where we help you actually embed AI in your classrooms, not your SLT, but in your classrooms, and we help you use that in a sort of hands-on approach and develop policies, processes, and attitudes that work well in your school and your setting. We've also got the literacy year coming up with Kaylee Leisure, who will take you through on a sort of month-by-month drop-in course with materials and so forth to help you develop literacy within your school. The whole focus of that really is about developing the joy of reading in your students, and I'm not sure that there's anything more noble than that. We've also got the data drop-in, which will be similar format as the literacy year. There'll be tasks and there'll be work to do, but there'll be a monthly drop-in session where we talk about how to manage the data and the data issues that are coming up at that particular point in the year. Along with that, we've got a regular show starting in January where we do a monthly review of a particular AI platform. Really sort of entry-level stuff. It's 15 or 20 minutes, and we just show you what it can do in a classroom setting, and at the end we decide whether it's any good or not. You'll be able to submit ideas and questions for that, so keep an eye out on LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, etc. So, enough about Koru. Purnell, all the way from Hong Kong, and what a journey it's been. 15 years of teaching and leadership experience across schools UK, Thailand, Hong Kong, and Belgium. I'm dying to ask which was your favorite, but I know you can't say that whilst we're online. Okay. Low school maths lead, a variety of various roles, associate deputy head, and really at the vanguard of bringing data to bear in a classroom setting. And I'm looking at all of those different things. You now also work as a coach. You're a trained coach, and you help bring that experience to bear with others. So hopefully we'll get to explore that a little bit as we go. You've worked in all of these different roles: teacher, curriculum leader, coach, loads of different countries, etc. How have these experiences shaped, developed, and nuanced your approach to data in education? Because a lot of people think it's dry, dull, tedious, boring, and they really can't be bothered with it.
Yeah, no, thank you for your time, Chris. Great to be here, and great to hear about the bite-sized AI things. That's something I'm certainly going to keep an eye on to have some tools and some strategies to try out in the classroom after that as well.
That's free, by the way. That's totally free.
There you go. Even better. Yeah. I think overall, I go back to when I was kind of trainee teaching, and I remember the good old days as I have very fond memories of APP, the assessing pupil progress documentation that we were having for maths and for writing and for reading and English. And I remember those conversations with my team back in the UK, looking at consistency of the data that was showing and what level they were, and the magic 4B at year 6, and kind of those elements of kind of going back to that. And then as time goes on, we're consistently surrounded by data, even looking at posts on LinkedIn with analytics of how many people have viewed and what your impressions are, and never mind the social media likes or hearts or all that kind of stuff. So I think we're consistently surrounded by data, and I think it's kind of separating what the value and purpose of it is, which is kind of the key things behind it. Yeah. So and then, as you say, really at the cliff face of class teacher level here, even on the blurred background, but my classroom is behind me, and just the amount of data that is actually available is scary on one hand, but also very exciting on the other. And it's back to that kind of the value of what we want in our classrooms, what we want to help with the children and in their learning, not just academically, but socially and well-being and resilience and all those other elements as well that we consider. And it's almost the sea of data and what actually we look for and the purpose behind it. So it's amazing to have so much available to us. And now I think it's having systems and processes to really try and decide what we use, when we use it, and how we use it. And that is context driven, it's subject specific, it's child specific, it's school specific. And lots of questions I think need to be asked first before we can then almost dive into what data we want to look at as well, and what we want it for.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you talked about how much data is kicking around out there and how much we're collecting. Do you think that as schools, and I'm not necessarily focusing on Harrow, do you think schools on the whole make use of all the data they collect, or are they just really good at collecting data and maybe need a little bit of support to consider what they do with that stuff?
Yeah, I think again it's going to be school specific. Some of that again is going to be driven by the context that they're in. If they're in the Middle East, for example, with your regular inspections, then there's going to be some elements there around the inspection process and what that looks like. If you're in the UK with Ofsted, and depending upon some of those elements, but again, it's context driven around maybe what your cohorts or what your school or what your children are. We do consider obviously the country that you're in. So there are lots and lots of considerations, and I think it is very school specific. It is also, I think, specific on the people in the role and what the school development plan is, and how they look at data and how they perceive data to be. For me, data is very much kind of the story. The story is about I went to a course, brilliant course, a data course in Thailand, actually, at Bromsgrove International. And I'm trying to remember today the name of the guy that delivered it, because I wanted to kind of give him a shout out for it. But I can't remember. It was brilliant in the nature that he kind of told the story of, if you're going on to a beautiful beach, and that golden nuggets have been found on this beach, and you go down without any tools, without any strategy, really going down and see if you can find something. And you spend hours trying to find it, and you can't find anything, and you're frustrated. And then, you see some children playing in the sand, just playing, not looking. And then they stumble across this golden nugget or whatever it is that they find, and they found this data, this piece of information that you wanted. And someone else is using a metal detector. So you're like, oh, we need the tools. Let's use the tools to try and find the data that we want. So then again, I think potentially schools can fall into a trap with looking at different tools, and it will give you this and it will give you that. Is it really what schools want, or is it just an add-on? So then you're looking at the tools that schools are using to collect the data. And then the idea being that the essence of the story was, take a step back, and there's a wise man or fairy godmother or whatever kind of character you want, basically saying, take a step back. I'm going to use another analogy that I found this week, which was brilliant. Get off the dance floor and look from the balcony. Look down, big picture.
Ooh, I might pinch that. I like that.
I loved it. I heard as I'm using that, so I'm already using it. It was only a few days ago. So get off the dance floor, get to the balcony, and look down. And then it expanded into, don't just look at dance floor either. Go to different dance floors and see different dancers, because then again you're gathering data. But the essence of that kind of fairy godmother idea is you go to the beach, go back to the beach, and then actually you look and you see there are flags in the sand. And I think that was a really good message to simplify data for me within school setting, is that you've got flags in the sand, and data is a flag. You're looking at your class data, for example. There are some flags in the sand that maybe are not the normal or not what you expect, or they're higher or lower than whatever it is. There are flags. With those flags, it doesn't mean that that's where you're going to find that golden nugget, but it's just a start. It's a better starting point than you just going down to the beach without a tool and without aimlessly looking. So I think that was a really nice analogy for me to kind of understand the essence of data around looking at those flags, not knowing that there's going to be a golden nugget there, because I think there's a danger that, again, we fall into that false positive that we only look at the flag and the location that there was a flag, rather than the story behind it as well. And then again, there's a great picture that I always use when I talk about data, which is the Lego picture. When you've got the ways that it's building a house, and that's how you tell the story behind it is important. Again, context driven. So the idea of flags in the sand, simplify it even more. There's flags in the sand. That's what data does, and then it allows you to interrogate those elements to try and go deeper, ask more questions, and try and find the information that you want. But I think again, a lot of that comes back down to what questions are you asking. There's the inquiry approach into it, rather than let the data give you ideas, but then keep asking questions.
Well, here's a question for you. I mean, you've talked about telling stories, and you and I have spoken about that before, and we're probably on the same page because I use that Lego diagram as well in the work that I do and the presentations and stuff that I make, which suggests that we're kind of a like mind. But you talk about telling stories, and I'm kind of curious. You and I are probably more data savvy than most, just because we work with it on a regular basis. How do you engage with those staff and possibly parents that are less comfortable with data and are more tempted to look at individual units of data and make judgments around that? How do you engage those people and get them to be able to tell their stories and exercise their judgment and ask those inquiring questions that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I think a big thing that is becoming a lot more prominent and a lot more accepted, even though it's always been there, is the value of relationships. And that's led me to do my coaching course and my coaching accreditation, is that value of relationships. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, the why and the relationships and leaders at last, and all those kind of elements are really, they sing to me, and that. So I think a massive part of it is relationships. People will not want to do things or want to try things if you haven't got authentic, positive relationships with people. So that's a big one, and of course that's probably another episode or podcast you can talk about relationships.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's driven through an understanding that we're all in this together. There's a purpose that's focused on the children. I think it's Jeff Bezos that always, when he used to do his talks, he used to have a chair in the middle of his meetings, and that represents the customer. And it's the concept that I've taken in, as far as there's a chair in some of my CPD, and that chair represents the child. It's all about the children. So what questions are we asking that's going to help drive data, but what can help drive the performance and potential of the individual child, that's in our care? So I think the most important thing is a shared purpose, a shared understanding that we don't know it all, and actually this is an inquiry into information, and we're using it to drive improvement, continue to improve, whether that's through academic data or improvement in teaching. For example, I, in the last couple of years, done a leadership MPQ where I did adaptive teaching in maths, specifically as maths lead. So the first thing I did was, we had some data around high performance. We're very good here. We've got high attaining children. But the first thing was sharing that. This is what our data says so far. It suggests that maybe that our higher ability children are not being as challenged as we want them to be. Yeah. We could sit on those laurels and go, we're fine. Scores are great. Tick the box for that. But we wanted to see if we can push them further. And that led into questions. And then I think the only constant in education is change. And it was really important to almost share the big picture. So every time I presented the longitudinal idea of what it is. And the next meeting I had, CPD, I brought back to, this is where we are now. This is what we said. It was followed up with surveys. What are your thoughts on that? What questions do you have? Again, bringing people into the process, not me leading it, yes, but bringing people into that process as a shared understanding of, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. There was no clear, this is what's going to happen next. And I think that's an element to it. There was a goal that was focused on children, not on staff necessarily.
Yeah.
So that helped to bring them on board with it. There was elements of vulnerability within saying, I don't know this. We're going to try this. We've done this. Yeah. It's supported by this evidence. It's supported by this research. These are the reasons why. Opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for questions, opportunities for answering those. And then for me, what I found most valuable is that when there were responses to surveys around it, the confidence of strategies or something else, the next session that I provided was in direct response to that. I was adaptive teaching the actual CPD program, if you like, with them. So that then got more buy-in. And again, for me, that was all authentic. There was no underhandedness around it. It was all because of, that's how I feel I wanted to lead the process, and it brought people on board. But again, it comes back to the question at the very beginning. I've got down, what is the purpose of collecting the data from the survey to support them? What tools will provide insights or may provide insights. And then the important thing I said at the beginning, am I preserving the sandcastles on the beach rather than destroying everything? And that's the relationships, and that comes back down in busy schools to making sure we're time bonded that's appropriate to allow reflection and response and experimentation. And knowing that experimentation, you're not going to get all the right results at the right time. So yeah, I don't think that's answered your question necessarily, but
no,
lots of elements
absolutely it
around
has.
that.
There's loads in there that's worth sort of touching back on. I think first of all, that's a really powerful message that as a leader, you're prepared to offer up your vulnerability, because I think that's modeling behavior that allows staff to be open about their vulnerability. And one of the core barriers with data particularly is people are nervous about asking questions for fear of looking silly, looking foolish, etc., etc. And that's a journey that I went on. I'll be honest. I was. It was a long time before I became what's loosely being described as a data geek or a data nerd. And it's a journey that you go on, and you're fearful of looking foolish, etc. And experimenting as well. That experimentation, that exploration, those sort of safe space ideas. Again, that's a big part of some of the work that I would offer up in many areas, including data. So for me, that all sounds a great way to bring people on that journey that we asked about. I think you've touched on the idea of the purpose of data, and you've talked about sort of using it to support the whole child. What does that look like? Because traditionally, people focus on academic grades, and particularly in the part of the world where you work, and I've worked in it. I've worked just across the water from in mainland China. Traditional academic grades were what parents wanted to hear about for the most part, and trying to take other things like the Cat 4 data or equivalents was a really hard sell in my context. How do you go about taking that forward with the whole child, looking at sort of social, emotional needs, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. For me, I think it comes back down to a really important element around when we look, for example, if we did a writing moderation, we're looking at a piece of writing, and the judgment, using whatever tools we use, the judgment is that piece of writing is this level or this grade. And it's really important for me, and I probably say it too much when I'm in our meetings, that is that piece of writing, that is not the child. So that piece of writing is this grade. That's not this child. Okay, that child wrote that piece of writing, but that's a single data point. If we are using single data points in any decisions that we make, then you might get lucky, but it's not a reliable and efficient process that you're doing to get quality decisions or choices, in my opinion. So there's that element to kind of dictate, and that's the chair again. It's about the child. This piece of writing is a level whatever. But this child, from the data that I've got, because they've been in my class and I've seen them and I've fed with them and I've fed back to them rather than feeding them, and then I've worked with them in groups, and I've seen them in the oracy skills sharing within shared planning, and they've stood up and presented on this other subject in a different subject, not just in English. And so I can say as a writer, I've got all these other data points that suggest that they are this grade. This piece of writing is this, but this child as a writer is this. So that different kind of element of, again, that for me, the looking at the balcony, you're getting back on that balcony and seeing what are the performances, and what's the phrase? I love the football. Form is temporary, class is permanent. It's like what data are we using to kind of support those decisions? And then, it goes back to asking the right question. So what information do we need to be able to reliably ask or have information around the whole child? But what is the whole child? School specific potentially as well, socially, academically, holistically, again, context driven around backgrounds and, affluence or non-affluence or whatever that is. So again, I think we've got to be school specific in a general term. We have started over the past few years making sure that we have got the data that we collect, like, for example, the Cat 4, like individual class wellbeing surveys at an appropriate level for the age and stage that they are as well, and building those, asking the right questions. So then within the survey, do you have a friend? to give us an idea of that situation, which then is part of an ingredient into the whole child. It goes to support the academic data. It goes to support the parent meeting notes. It goes to support the CAT4 assessments. It goes to support class teacher interventions. And here we're very good. I'll shout out Dawn, who's brilliant here as assessment lead, where we have CAT meetings. So we have meetings, we all meet as individual class teacher, I meet with Dawn, and we look at as much data as we can around my class. So I'm going in tunnel vision around my class, around my children. We have obviously elements of the data that we look at, and we discuss children. We don't discuss data. We use the data to discuss the children. We don't use the children to discuss their data, kind of idea. Again, vision is how you look at it. And that provides then appropriate decisions and actions, intervention, support, opportunities for stretch and challenge, all those kind of elements from that conversation, rather than it just being data points, which is really, really positive that you have that conversation. It's really lovely to talk about your own class, and lovely to talk about their strengths, and know that you are, you're the biggest cheerleader. You're saying, Chris is struggling with this, but it'd be really helpful if we could do this, this, and this, and that is accepted. That data, which is not a single point or a measure, but that data in itself, like qualitative data, is valued in the same way as the quantitative data. So that's kind of how we do it here, which is really productive and really supported.
That's a pretty big resource commitment, though. The time to go through those conversations is a pretty big resource commitment, and it takes a significant amount of SLT goodwill and staff goodwill to make that happen, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose again, we've been in that conversation, or those conversations with other class teachers, where it gets to an end of a year or an end of a term, and it's about, okay, what award are we going to give? And everyone's fighting for someone in their class, and that real kind of responsibility about, or someone covers your class, and you go, well, your class, my class are the best class. What are you on about? Kind of, there is that protective nature as class teachers of your own class, and it's brilliant to have that. All teachers go into the profession not for the money. They go in for the love of the children and the enjoyment that they can provide those opportunities and growth, and I can go on and on. So the fact that we have the opportunity to share that and almost be the champion of our children is a really, really nice opportunity. So it's great. In a previous school in Hong Kong, we had a similar thing around like pupil profiles. So that was looking at I can never remember them when I need to remember them, but it was basically a triangulation of data. So it was aptitude, attitude, and attainment. There we go. I remembered it. Amazing. So attitude, and attainment. So it was measuring, those different elements and putting them together to create a profile of an individual, which is still data, but then we've got more around that with further qualitative data. And then I suppose the big element overall is coming back to, I've been at schools and seen schools where they've got dashboards galore and different tools that are snazzy and amazing and everything else, but then practitioners are turned off because they don't know how to use it. They don't know what to use it for. So I think it's asking the right questions, saying that again, to then know what tool is going to give us this information, and then how we're going to follow through with that information as the feedback loop to make sure that we're using it. Again, for the child that's sat on the chair in front of us, for the children that are sat in our classroom, in our cohort, in our year group, etc.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm curious because historically, particularly in the UK, data was sort of brought in and used as part of an accountability model, and that possibly sort of reduced the buy-in from staff. It made a degree of cynicism, and you would kind of get to your results review and either get clobbered or a pat on the back or what have you. But things do go wrong with data, and how do you respond to that when it's either the sort of missharing of data or misinterpretation, etc.? How do you deal with that without sort of destroying the buy-in from the people that are taking those risks and engaging with it?
Yeah, so it's the ultimate question, isn't it? I think a lot of the choices or decisions or actions at that point when we find we don't like it for whatever reason, or there's an error, is that having a really secure foundation of those relationships. I think if you've really built that really solid understanding of trust, authenticity and true authenticity around the purpose behind why we're doing these things, then we can have hopefully the confidence in each other to be able to, number one, raise it, share it, and converse around it. And I mean, there's one element, for example, around doing the aptitude tests, let's say the Cat 4, and I'm a firm believer personally that the purpose of the assessments are to give the most accurate data of what they're assessing. Now, if we're trying to provide the most accurate data, we want to remove scientifically all possible flaws within the testing process.
Yeah.
Now, what we've done in the past is we've had, let's say, a lesson, a session, whatever it is you want to call it, where you've modeled and shared the program with the children. So, and what they are, how they click. Some of these children have never used a mouse before because they're too busy using their iPads now. It's all touchscreen. Yeah. So if they go to using a mouse and having to move and wearing headphones, which they're not used to wearing, then are we providing an opportunity for these children to experience the testing process and what that looks and feels like, to then allow us to know that when they've gone in and done an assessment, yeah, they can have good days, bad days anyway, but that actually the reliability of the information that we're receiving is based upon the assessment and not on other factors because they couldn't hear it, or they didn't know how to use a mouse, or they just weren't sure of the concept of the program, you know? So that's something that I think we found an increase in our reliability, our feeling of the reliability of what we thought a child A was getting a score that was more representative of what our thinking was. And that was because of, we felt, and this was not just one child across the kind of a school, is we've provided the opportunity for them to experience the testing process. So when we were going, again, the reliability was increased because they were looking at the assessment. So there's that element, I think, to consider. But yeah, trust, authenticity, raise it, have a conversation around it and saying, well, let's go back to our question. What is this data for? What is the purpose of it? What are all the possible reasons why child A got this standardized score of 85 and the last 5 times they've done it, they've got 125? We can look at the well-being data. We can look at the pastoral data. But you can't do any of that unless there's the relationships and trust and systems and processes. Number one, systems and processes that exist to allow you to look.
Yeah.
But the culture, I suppose, is the word. The culture around that data is every single piece of data is an individual piece, and it's about the collaborative data together that paints the better picture idea. So, yeah, massive amount on culture. A massive amount on trust and relationships to open the conversation. But yeah, again, I think it's that also comes down from the design of data around choosing the right tools for the right reason, not just choosing a brand new platform with all these fancy little things that do lots of different things that actually end up confusing people.
Yeah, and you know, that's why I left the corporate world, because the pressure was to bring those to market and to push those out, and there was a tension between sort of academic integrity versus the commercial pressure that you were under in the workplace. So that's lovely to hear as well. Listen, time is ticking by, Travis, and I could talk to you for hours, but just one final thing, practical advice for educators. If you were going to give a bit of advice, perhaps let's think of both ends of the teaching spectrum. You've got an NQT coming in, and you've got a dyed-in-the-wool, very experienced, seasoned old boy like myself, perhaps sort of at the other end. What advice would you give those people around school data?
My first thing would be it's data is everywhere. We're not, even more so now with technology advancement, we're not going to be able to escape data. So we've got to try and use it. And how do we best use the data? Data is a tool, it's not a goal. That's what I've got kind of written down as a note to share. And then know the purpose behind the data that you collect. So if you are an early career teacher, and someone says, we'll do this test, be able to trust, relationships, culture. Why are we collecting this data? What is the purpose of this? Do we need to spend this lesson doing a test for this data? How are we going to use this? How is this data going to feed into the child sat in front of me, or the class sat in front of me, or the cohort sat in front of me? And hopefully, being able to ask those questions on how it is going to be useful for me or for the children, then I think that question that gets asked as the school bell here goes.
I like that. How useful is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how useful is it? But also, what other data can we consider? What flag is it? What flag is it showing us? Is it just a flag that we can look at and tell a story? What is the story behind that flag? And what other data is there to support or not support that as well? So almost be quite critical. Get off the dance floor, get on that balcony, and look at the data and try and interrogate it. I think my love of data came from football tables, goals scored, goals conceded, fixture lists, all that stuff, which was fascinating because you could almost plan and predict and work out if this happens, this happens. So, and then for me, collaboration. Don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. You might have your own class, but there are so many times I go next door to colleagues, or we have the moderations, and we've got the right culture. We can ask those questions and go, hey, I've got so many of this, I've got so many of that. What have you got? And what do you think? Oh, can you have a look at this? Because I think it's this. So it's culture, collaboration, relationships, trust, all those kind of key things for me, which are the foundation for everything else, systems and processes to work on top of. But don't work in a silo, work in a team, check with other people. If you're not sure, ask. And get off the dance floor, get on the balcony, ask questions and plan why, what is it for, and how is it going to help me and the children.
And Travis, I can say with all honesty and integrity, having visited Harrow and being around your classrooms and things like that, this is actually a lived philosophy. This isn't something that's been put together for the podcast. So I've seen it in action. I'm a first-hand witness, and that's why we wanted to get you on the podcast so desperately. And it is one of the nicest schools I've visited. You've got a fabulous location, and the team that you have there that I've worked with are great. So Charles Purnell, it has been an absolute pleasure, and we are well over time, but that's fine because there were some pearls of wisdom and some real nuggets of gold in there. Thanks so much for joining us today, and all the best.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for your time.